is whether these lines of business really coincide with your current core competencies. The second biggest issue we see with your firm is the declining demand for sparkling beverages. Currently, sparkling beverages are expected to decline 2% over the coming years, while still beverages are expected to rise by 2% over the coming years. This will have a major impact on your bottom line. We believe by following our recommendations, we will help you to achieve your 2020 vision. And now I'd like to pass it off to Josh Katz, who will go through our recommendations for you.
Thank you, Natalie. As my colleague mentioned, the asset-intensive businesses of bottling and distribution don't directly align with your core competencies. However, bottling your own product will be key to your achieving your 2020 vision. And therefore, we recommend you retain the bottling business and divest the distribution, removing some of the assets and debt on your balance sheet and focusing those resources on bottling and manufacturing. In addition, we recommend you acquire an upcoming sparkling beverage switch. Now, this is a sparkling beverage, however, we believe it matches the market characteristics of the growing still market. And we'll explain why later. Jeff will now discuss the external forces affecting your firm.
Thank you, Josh. Now, in terms of the threat of new entrants, this threat is relatively low due to Pepsi and Coca-Cola's extensive market share. The level of rivalry is high due to the cola wars associated with this competition, and the bargaining power of the buyers is also high. The reason it's high is because there are so many different bottling contracts with our companies and our vendors. In addition, the bargaining power of suppliers is moderate due to the high costs associated with sweetener and aluminum, which are expensive commodities in general. Finally, in terms of availability of substitutes, this is also moderate. Even though Coca-Cola has a wide array of products, you still have a lot of competition in your marketplace from Pepsi and Dr. Pepper. Now I'm going to have Eric discuss the internal factors of Coca-Cola.
Thank you, Jeff. As Jeff mentioned, I'll now discuss the internal factors affecting your company, Coca-Cola. Obviously, Coca-Cola is a global firm all over the world in many different countries. However, for our recommendation, we're going to focus mostly on North America, namely the United States, because that's where we see most of your growth occurring in the future years. The other arena that we're going to focus on is the public schooling. Public schools is already a sector that Coca-Cola is already slightly in, but we believe that with our recommendation to acquire Switch, Coca-Cola could really break into public schools and really increase the revenue this way. The vehicles in which Coca-Cola will get to these arenas is through maintaining their bottling, not selling it off, keeping it and controlling it themselves, and also selling the distribution. Nate will go into more detail about this in the recommendation. However, we believe this will make Coca-Cola more efficient and therefore more profitable. Next is the differentiation that Coca-Cola has over other brands. It's really the brand equity for Coca-Cola. Coke is internationally recognized, and once someone knows that a drink is manufactured by Coke, they automatically associate it with quality. Also, the brand presence, it's everywhere. If someone gets into a restaurant, they want a drink, they'll order Coke or Sprite, not Pepsi or Sierra Mist. And this is because Coke is already seen as a premium distributor and manufacturer of beverages. Next is the staging for this. This will occur over the next 10 years, as per Coca-Cola's 2020 vision. There are many milestones and benchmarks along the way, but the end goal is really to double revenue by 2020 and also double the amount of servings consumed per day to about 3 billion. While these are lofty goals, we believe they are very attainable if you follow our recommendation. Lastly, the economic logic that will get you here is vertical integration. By maintaining, bottling, and selling the distribution, you'll be able to focus on your core competencies and vertically integrate, therefore decreasing costs, increasing synergies, and ultimately helping your bottom line. Now I'll pass it off to Nate, who will discuss the recommendation in more detail.
Thank you, Eric. After carefully analyzing Coca-Cola's strategic competitive environment, we have come up with several key recommendations we would like you to consider. First, we think that you should continue to expand your existing bottling operations. This will allow you to effectively manage the quality control of over 500 of your brands, and you will also remain flexible to adapt to any future market conditions. Additionally, you will be able to realize several economies of scale and scope. Our next recommendation is that you sell your existing distribution operations. We recommend that you do this in order to reduce the amount of assets and debt on your balance sheet. You purchased PCB distribution operations for $4.5 billion. We believe that an independent distributor would be able to purchase the consolidated distribution operation and realize 2% cost synergy savings. We believe you can leverage this to sell the distribution operations for $5.5 billion. However, the challenge that will arise here is coordinating the distribution of all of your brands. We therefore recommend that you adopt an administered vertical marketing system. This will establish an in-house channel captain to coordinate all of the distribution logistics with this independent distributor. Our third key recommendation is that you acquire the sparkling juice beverage Switch. Switch is a very young and small but innovative growth company. It would require very little capital, less than $20 million to acquire. We believe that it would cost less than $20 million to acquire. And as Josh will go into further depth later on, it can be very profitable to do so. Even more important though, it will allow Coca-Cola to expand into two key target markets. First, Switch distributes most of their products to school systems, a key target market that Coke could pursue. Additionally, Switch is a healthy juice beverage, which would appeal to health-conscious consumers. We believe that acquiring Switch would be similar to when you acquired Fuse Beverage in 2007. Fuse was a very small fruit juice beverage company, and you were able to quickly leverage your existing national client relationships and core competencies to secure contracts to distribute Fuse to over 22,000 Subway restaurants. In 1 year alone, sales of Fuse increased by 129%. We believe that Switch exhibits similar growth potential and would strongly recommend that you consider purchasing it. Theo will now discuss some alternatives that you may like to consider.
Thank you, Dave. Some alternatives to the recommendation that we laid out are to, instead of split up the bottling and distribution, keep them together and have a truly vertically integrated value chain. On the flip side of this, you could also sell both the bottling and distribution and return to the business model that Coke operated with prior to the acquisition of CCE. Some alternatives to acquiring the up-and-coming brand Switch are to explore other healthy beverage brands to acquire, to develop a healthy beverage brand in-house, or to not add a healthy brand to your portfolio at all. However, we strongly advise against this since, as Natalie demonstrated earlier, the healthy beverage market is growing while the sparkling beverage market is declining. Now I'm going to go into how to implement our recommendation. As you can see, we've broken down the implementation into two parts. First, the sale of the distribution business, and then the acquisition of Switch. There are a few key things that Coca-Cola will need to do in the sale of the distribution business. The first is to actually separate the bottling and distribution business functions. After they're separated, Coke will need to find a buyer and complete the sale. Once the sale is complete, it's going to be necessary that Coke maintains a positive relationship with their new distributor so that you can have a mutually beneficial relationship moving forward. The implementation strategy for Switch is fairly simple since Coke has acquired so many other beverages in the past. The first step is going to be to reach out to the management of Switch Beverage Company, which is Mike Haggerty and Bill Hargis. After the acquisition is complete, it's going to be necessary to switch over some of your existing cold-fill bottling facilities to bottle Switch. Let me just reiterate that Switch is a sparkling juice, so it is bottled in a cold-fill beverage facility, which will help fill your excess capacity. Once Coca-Cola has Switch in its brand portfolio and is bottling it in its own facilities, Coca-Cola can use its brand power and marketing power to expand Switch nationally. This includes expanding its presence from over 1,000 schools to well over 5,000 in the next 3 years. This will allow Switch to penetrate into new markets that Coca-Cola otherwise would have been unable to, using its other sparkling drink brands. And now I'm going to turn it over to Josh to go over some of the numbers that we presented.
Thank you, Theo. So we're all very excited about these recommendations and think that by following them, it will help you achieve your 2020 vision. However, we realize they do have significant impacts for your business, so we've analyzed those and would like to discuss them now. First, the existing operating margin for CCE is 35 cents per unit case, of which Coke sells 5.1 billion annually in North America. In addition, with the cost synergies that Nate discussed, by consolidating the distribution business, we can combine an additional 9 cents per case. Now, we'll be retaining 29 cents per case for the bottling business and divesting 15 cents. In exchange for that, you're also looking to trim $3.5 billion in debt, which is about 40% from the CCE acquisition, and reducing the amount of assets on your balance sheet, which should increase your return on assets and your return on equity. So you paid $12 billion for CCE, of which $4.5 billion was the distributor. Now, given the cost synergies, we believe this can now achieve a valuation of $5.5 billion. In addition to selling the business, what we're recommending you divest is the $3.5 billion in debt, the 55,000 trucks you own, 350 distribution centers, as well as guaranteed rights to the 4.5 billion unit cases that CCE has distributed up until this point. This package creating a very lucrative offering to a potential buyer. For the Switch acquisition, they currently have $1.3 million in sales. It's a small company. In addition, after doing industry research, we've identified their operating margin to be about 15%. And even at a purchase premium of 400%, and we do not recommend you offer 400% premium at the start. However, we're illustrating that even at a purchase price that they cannot hold out for, you can acquire this company for $16 million. You combine this explosive product with a growing still market, and Coke's ability to put this in every store in the country, as illustrated with views, and you get 2% still market share by 2015. Combined with Coke's operating margin, as previously discussed, 29 cents per unit case, you get EPS accretion by 2012, and a return on investment and net present value of about $500 million. This is an illustration of what the still market looks like over the next 5 years. So currently about 450 trillion 8-ounce servings are consumed annually in the United States, and still is growing at about 2%. This is an illustration of what we think still Switch can achieve in market share. So the initial investment is going to be about $50 million. $20 million to acquire, $10 million to restructure, which should be low because there's only 11 employees, as well as an additional $25 million in marketing on top of the $2 billion that Coke does annually. You can see the cash flow is growing over the next 5 years, that project SPV, but more importantly, what it gives you is access to the primary schools, which we believe will lay the foundation for your future growth towards 2020. Josh?
Thank you, Josh. Thank you, everyone, for being here tonight. As we've reiterated, we believe that if you capitalize on our recommendations, you will be able to achieve your 2020 vision and ultimately retain your brand image as the most powerful brand in the world. Thank you very much for your interest and your attention, and now we'd like to open up the floor to any questions that you may have.
Thank you. Could you please elaborate on your expectation that we can sell our distribution business? Is it your recommendation that you believe we'll find a single buyer for this distribution business, or will we be engaging multiple regionalized distributors?
For this acquisition or divest, there's two different routes you can go, and that's either the regional or the national buyers. Personally, we believe for your firm, the national buyer is the better option because Coke has such a wide product variety, over 500 different brands. Managing that in regional sectors will be very difficult. So we believe that this centralized management by going with a national firm will definitely help that divest go much smoother. And on top of that, we have looked at a few possible firms that you would be interested in selling to, two of which are private equity firms. Apollo, which is a $35 billion fund, and American Capital Partners, which is a $68 billion fund. Both of these to look for acquisitions in your industry, and the current acquisition price would be about a $2 billion in equity and $3.5 billion in debt. So we believe these are very attainable for these firms of this size. The other option you could possibly go with is with Clean Trucking. They have 54,000 delivery locations already, and they're specialized in distributing your type of products. The only issue you may see with this is for your firms, they already work with other products and brands. They might not show Coca-Cola's true to brand image as well as a firm such as private equity ones that would only be working for Coca-Cola.
To illustrate a little bit more depth on your valuation question, which I believe you asked, how do you get to the $5.5 billion in valuation for the distributor? So here are the operating income currently for the distributor, and then pro forma, that's that 9% cost synergy, which we can show where that comes from. But basically, you find the unit case line that CCC distributes to get an operating income of about $1.3 billion annually. Now, this is a relatively simplistic valuation model, and if you're interested in giving more diligence, but essentially we apply a 4.5 valuation multiple, and that might seem low, but given the very low operating margin, that's pretty normal for the industry. And that gives you your enterprise value of $5.8 billion, of which 3.5 is debt, which means that the private equity fund only needs to shell out $2.8 billion in cash, which makes us think it's a very acquirable firm.
Not to mention, acquiring the distribution business is very lucrative because it's essentially a turnkey business. We're giving them the trucks, we're giving them the distribution facilities, and we're providing them with Coca-Cola products to distribute. They have the demand, they have the infrastructure, it's ready to go. It's essentially waiting for someone to take over.
Thank you.
I'd like to understand why you are so in favor of Switch, and how for you it differs from simply selling a flavored seltzer. I was surprised to look at the can. An 8-ounce serving is 120 calories. That seems like a lot, and typically people drink more than 8 ounces.
Well, there are several reasons why we recommend Switch. First, it is a very healthy beverage. Those 120 calories come from all 100% natural fruit juice concentrates. And additionally, it is FDA approved, that's why it's distributed to schools. So we believe that it can appeal to children all across the country.
We believe that these health factors are very important to Coca-Cola's brand image, since there are a lot of trends associated with unhealthy beverages and snacks in the United States, as well as trends in high obesity. And we believe that counteracting these trends with a beverage like Switch will be particularly important for those markets and schools.
And just addressing with the high calorie count, as Nate mentioned earlier, it is from natural sugar, and it might not be addressing the concerns of obesity as much as the concerns of consuming unnatural products, such as high fructose corn syrup. That's a big one that people are starting to become more and more against on the road.
They covered it.
Two questions. My first question goes back to the issue of the spinning off of the distribution business. Do you have any concerns if we spin it off to one major player that we end up in a captive situation where we basically are creating a giant that we're going to be doing business with that's going to have incredible power over us? Do you see any downside to that?
Sure. So I think the first question is, what are the main issues with the divestiture? And the second question is, what legal precautions are we thinking about taking to protect ourselves? So first, let me pull up the major issues with the divestiture. But absolutely, the legal concerns is one of them, which is why a big part of the divestiture will be negotiating those contracts, because we are guaranteeing $4.5 billion, which can be a very risky license to provide, which is why we're recommending you put in clauses, giving you a world-class legal team to handle that. But other than the legal aspects, the key issue with the divestiture is you no longer have control of a complete vertically integrated market. And that's isn't but what we believe is that the amount of benefit you're getting by reducing 50% of your assets and giving you a small percentage of your operating margin far outweighs any loss of control you'll have in the distribution. In addition, distribution is a low know-how business. Bottling is knowledge intensive. So if your acquirer gets aggressive in the market, there are plenty of other players like McLean, like Apollo, like American Capital Partners that can come in and take their place.
We recommend that you work with your legal team to provide incentives within those contracts to make sure that whichever distributor we divest to will be acting in terms within the favor of Coca-Cola.
I have a question about slide number 9, which actually was an alternative slide. After you provided your original recommendations, you then went on to some alternatives about that you could actually keep or sell the bottling and distribution business together. as well as some different alternatives related to the development of the healthy products and the healthy brand. And I just was curious as to, you seem to have solid recommendations elsewhere in the presentation, and then to come in and say, but we could also keep or sell the bottling and distribution. I guess, what made you include this as part of the recommendations, and did you have advantages or disadvantages as to why you really went with your fundamental recommendation, but yet still thought it was important to provide this sense of information?
Well, we put that in there just because we currently do own it, so it is always an option to keep it and not sell it. But we believe that selling it would provide us more of our core business, creating the syrup and bottling it instead of having to deal with also distributing it, which isn't really labor intensive. So we believe that anyone can really do that, and it's not something we should put much time and effort on.
In addition, the major pro to developing a product in-house is its Coke's own core competencies going into it. The downside is going to take a little bit more time. We've also identified Coke's average R&D on a new product to be upwards of $60 million. So you can get this project going much quicker at a lower price, which is why it's an option, and it's looking at some competencies, but not what we suggest is the strongest possible.
How did you plan on addressing the 10% remaining of the bottling companies that you no longer or have no control over at this point? I mean, clearly, the CCE strategy was to buy the least healthy of the bottlers that were out there, bring them under our umbrella, establish the product down the road. We would sit in the back out and get a new franchisee, which is kind of important to us, that franchise model. But clearly, the ones who are remaining are highly successful, obviously highly profitable, and some possible fallout that might happen from some sort of bidding war to acquire these firms, which have strong, reputations in their community. Quite often, local bottlers support sports teams and what have you, and have built these strong relationships in their local areas.
These independent bottlers account for 10%, like you said, and many of them have been in business for over 100 years. But since there's such a small fraction of Coca-Cola's North American bottling, we think it would be in Coca-Cola's best interest to let these bottlers go about their business until they start messing up like the bottlers that CCE began to acquire.
Thank you.
A question on our brand. We spent a fair amount of time talking about our brand. Was any consideration given to whether we should be branding our non-Coke products that are clearly Coke with a Coke name?
So just to understand the question, should you Coke trademark onto the product?
Not just Switch, but many of our other products. You elaborated on how strong our brand is worldwide.
So, absolutely. Coke trademark is actually on 50% of their products and generates about 50% of the revenue in North America, which is key. I think two things that we're illustrating by the power of the brand is not only the ability for a consumer to see Coke and know it's a buy, but also the relationship you have with stores, which doesn't depend on Coke trademark. That just depends on the Coke company, which is what we do to get Coke into the stores. In terms of the trademark question, we're not suggesting that you start trademarking all products, especially Switch, with the Coke trademark, given that there is a bit of stigmatism on the sparkling sugar drink. There's a huge market for it, which is why we're suggesting we separate from the consumer.
One final question. Why would we spend any money to buy a company that's $1.5 million revenue? Why don't we just make our own?
We're really buying the formula here. As Josh said, this acquisition is pennies on the Coke's balance sheet, so it doesn't really cost us much. We're buying the formula. As you may have tasted already, the drink is delicious. So you're buying the formula, you're buying the ingredients, and just the know-how of how to make this drink. Not to mention the R&D to create this would be about $60 million as opposed to the maybe $10 million acquisition. So just to spend all that on R&D instead of acquiring it just didn't make sense to us.
Additionally, we're buying a relationship with those schools that we mentioned earlier. In order to get the proper approval to be sold in a school system, it's a lengthy process, and that's just going to add even more money to the expected cost to develop your own product in-house.
Furthermore, we believe you could use your existing national client relationships to secure contract deals for Switch to distribute it nationally. If you secure one contract alone,
on marketing against the trends of obesity and against the trends of unhealthy foods throughout North America. So it's really important that you acquire Switch so that you have the opportunity to combat these factors.
For us, the U.S. is really representative of the growth in the U.S., especially in the Southern Smile, California, Florida, Carolina. Those 11 states are going to grow a lot until 2020. Urban cities are going to become even more populated. So we just see a lot of growth potential in the U.S. While we should only focus on the U.S., a lot of our 2020 vision doubling revenues are going to come from the